Hey everybody, and welcome. We have a stream going on today. This is for the Premodern 64 deck Super Gauntlet. I'm Michael Hoyp. I'm here today with Lester Smerling. Say hi, Lester.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. The first deck that I have up is going to be played by Felix, and he has a red-green goblins list. And this deck, the red-green goblins deck has been pretty consistent in the last few months of pre-modern, but this list has a couple of changes that I want to talk about. The first card, which you might see on screen that you might not recognize, is Hearth Charm. So off the top of your head, Lester, do you know what Hearth Charm does?
I do.
Oh, okay.
Destroys an artifact creature plus one. I don't know what the third one is.
+1/+0 to all attacking creatures, and then the third mode is target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn. So a modal card that actually, I guess when I first saw it, I thought of it as a nod against Phyrexian Dreadnought, but really the other two modes are actually pretty relevant. You can go wide in a Goblins deck, and pumping the team might have a little bit of effect. But then also the last mode of giving a small creature to be unblockable is good with Goblin Lackey, also Goblin Piledriver before it gets that trigger. So all three modes could be used in this Goblins deck, so it's an interesting addition. So I think that's a card that I have not a lot of experience with, so I will be interested to see if that card pulls its weight. The other card that's in this list, and it's kind of hard to see, it's tucked away on this visual, but there's a copy of Gaia's Cradle in the Goblins list, which is not something that I've seen,
That's huge.
but definitely makes a lot of sense. The one thing to note is there are only 2 copies of Siege Gang Commander, which I feel like if I would like to see more. I think that's just like one of the most powerful cards from Goblins, but and can really take advantage of a Gaia's Cradle. But I do like the idea of getting a bunch of creatures in play and then getting a bunch of mana with the Gaia's Cradle. So the other things to note about this, the green splash is the sideboard cards. There's 4 naturalize and then 3 Caller of the Claw, and then a Tranquil Domain. And so those are that's the reason why he's playing the green splash, because there's nothing in the main deck. So he's just having those access for those sideboard cards. I will jump over to the other deck, and that is the 4-color control. So what this deck is if you take a blue-white control shell, and then you change the mana base a little bit, and then you're adding primarily green for some Wall of Blossoms, and then Gaia's Blessing to give you some inevitability. And then it also has Fire Ice, so there's red on the second half of Fire Ice, and then also there's some Pyroblasts in the sideboard. But other than that, it's pretty much just a blue-white control, and it is looking, the mana is based off of Reflecting Pool and Grand Coliseum to kind of get those extra colors. So what are your thoughts about this deck?
Um, the control deck is decent. I have some issues with some of the card choices, like Absorb isn't as great. But I totally understand why he's playing it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think this is exactly the matchup he's looking for. He wants to run into small creatures.
Yeah, yeah. He might get the ability of with accumulated knowledge, just getting his deck like pretty low if the games go really long, and he's just able to juice his deck back up with the Gaia's Blessing, and then just wrath over and over and over, and then take over the game that way. All right.
Yep.
So let's jump over to the match. If you would be able to let the players know that they're able to start, looks like they are just finishing up drawing their hands, and then we'll get started. So, do you have an inclination of who is
You
it?
guys can begin.
Oh, they probably have you muted, so if you could send it in the Facebook Messenger.
I am muted.
Okay.
I'm advanced. 1 second here. I actually think that the Goblin deck is favored here. To be honest with you, even though this is the deck the control deck wants,
Mm-hmm.
I think the Goblins is a little bit favored here.
Yeah.
I think after board, the Caller of the Claw is going to be pretty huge, and then the fact that he's got 2 sharpshooters, I think, is a little bit of an advantage.
So are you thinking that because of Decree of Justice, or just more of the interaction of being able to set up a board where he's able to shoot his opponent down?
I think because of the Decree is the only win condition on the other side.
Okay.
And it's really a big defense too. So being able to sharpshooter away the creatures is kind of nice.
So that is the Grand Coliseum. So that can tap to add any mana and take a damage, or it can add colorless, but it comes into play tapped. So really, Felix wants to start with a Goblin Lackey. Oh, well, I guess that's a way to do it too, is if
Season 2.
Just wastelanding the opponent. I mean, the mana base is somewhat fragile from the 4-color deck, and taking out like the Grand Coliseum, if you're relying on Reflecting Pool of getting multiple mana sources, then you can really cut them off of that.
This deck is fairly pinched on the white mana too, so that's a pretty good play.
And then we do see the turn 2 Goblin Lackey. So another reason why you might want to go Wasteland first is if Grand Coliseum is the one white source that you have for Swords to Plowshares, or maybe like Wall of Blossoms or something. If that was the source that Manos was relying on to answer a Goblin Lackey, and he doesn't have it available anymore, that could be a reason why Felix was taking it out first, as compared to going for a turn 1 Lackey.
It could be he could have been planning on Fire and Ice too.
Sure.
So definitely love the Wasteland play there.
And it looks like this Lackey is connecting, so
War Chief.
Yep, looks like that's the card he's picking. So usually, a lot of times I do like putting the War Chief into play, because it just makes your next turn like so much more powerful, because you're usually able to play like a Goblin Matron and then get whatever you want, and then the next turn play something else and attack with all those goblins.
This is also kind of a free turn because you can't Wrath yet, so you got a turn to play stuff out, and then next turn do stuff too before you have to worry.
So a Skirk Prospector and a Goblin Piledriver have been added.
That's pretty crazy.
And so yeah, given that he knows that he's going to have one turn without the Wrath of God, I think he's really just looking to close the door. Especially because, I mean, you're putting your opponent on not having a Swords to Plowshares because the Lackey didn't get plowed. Yeah, a tapped Grand Coliseum. Yeah, so trying to think of what cards. I mean, I guess he could ice. He can't ice the Piledriver because it's pro blue, but so he's probably taking a big chunk of damage regardless of what's in his hand. I guess Swords to Plowshares is probably the only card I can think of from his list.
Yeah, he's probably taking at least 11 here, unless he has some interaction. If I did my math right.
What's going to happen if there's a Hearth Charm?
Ooh.
That's just 4 more damage, I guess.
Right.
So.
He could misclick on it, though. Oh, another Wasteland, too.
Okay, yeah, this seems... Oh, well, he's tapping it, so... Oh, the Goblin Pyromancer. Okay, so...
Oh, yeah.
This card, it's kind of narrow, but it's pretty sweet when it works. So what it does, I'll bring it up. It's a 4-mana 2/2, but its cost is reduced because it is a goblin. And when it comes into play, it gives all goblins +3/+0 until end of turn. And then it has, which is very good, but then it does have the clause at the end of turn, destroy all goblins.
So you had the swords for the
Piledriver. So, okay, so we lost Lester for a moment, but so if he's plowing the Piledriver, this trigger's still going to go, and it does have haste. So we have all the 1 powers become 4, and the 2 powers become 5. So that's 14 damage right here. And he is able to sacrifice the Pyromancer to Skirk Prospector at the end of turn, so he's not going to lose all his goblins. So this should be an attack for 14 and with a Lackey trigger. You back, Lester?
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay.
Now, the good question here is he's only got 2 cards in hand now, so I don't think he actually used the Lackey.
I guess it depends. I mean, if it were a Siege Gang, you for sure would, because you'd have enough damage for lethal. Because he's attacking for 14. Yeah.
Or Sharpshooter.
Yeah, Sharpshooter should be able to get the job done too. I think. Yeah, I think he would have just enough with the Sharpshooter because he wouldn't be able to sacrifice the War Chief. Okay, so I'm guessing he sacrificed the Goblin Piledriver for mana as compared to getting the life. So he used a Mogg Fanatic. That one doesn't have the bonus, so this should be 15 damage if I counted correctly. 10 from the 2 power creatures and 14 from the 1 powers, and then plus another one from the Mogg Fanatic. So 15 would put him down to 4. And then he does have a Mogg Fanatic, but he still needs a little bit more damage to finish off the control player. Oh, well. Did he show a card with Lackey, or was it just a position where mana didn't have...
Maybe he didn't have the 4th mana too.
The 2 of the 1 power creatures were hitting for 4 each, but the Mogg Fanatic came into play after the Goblin Pyromancer. So that one was only hitting for 1. Alright, well that first game looks like it went to the Goblins player. So let's jump over to our sideboards and talk about how things change. So I had the 4-color control deck up. What are your thoughts about Circular Protection Red for... Oh, it was 19. Okay, sorry. Yeah, chat's right. Okay. So do you like circle protection against goblins?
I don't really like circle protection against goblins myself. I think he's gonna board it in. He's got copper red in his sideboard, but I think a lot of times with the goblin player, it just lets you basically port him. He's got to leave one open. They just keep porting themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Powder Keg is way more important.
Yeah, I would bring in Powder Keg.
I actually think the Powder Keg is Tsabo's web. I think the web is actually pretty good.
Interesting. Okay.
And I actually think he's going to bring in Hydroblast too.
Yeah, that makes sense. The Hydroblast definitely.
The web shuts down Richmond Import, which can squeeze your mana. Yep, and it's a freebie. Like, it just cycles itself basically. So
sure. Yeah, the Powder Keg is something I would bring in. The thing is, Goblins does a pretty good job of diversifying its converted mana costs. It has 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s and even 5s and 0s. So it's not like you're going to get the entire board most likely with a Powder Keg. But it would be a card I would bring in.
Right. I think obviously the Disenchant's pretty dead here. Absorbs are probably too slow.
Yeah.
And maybe make up the rest of them with mana leaks.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You're not going to be countering too much stuff. Would you bring in the Cop Red here?
I mean, it's one of those cards is like... I feel like it's only good against Goblin Piledriver. And... I mean, maybe if I had other really bad cards to bring out, but I think I would bring the other cards in first. Hydroblast and Powder Keg and, yeah, even the Tsabo's Web, I think are better cards than Circle Protection Red. I don't know.
Yep, I agree.
Looking at the Goblins list, the Call of the Claws are the first card that look really good. Naturalize, I mean, sometimes...
I don't think there's any targets.
Yeah. Are you keeping in the Hearth Charm? Are those coming out? No.
I think that's the first one that comes out.
Yeah.
Let me look at the list here.
The Goblin Tinker is another card that there aren't that many artifacts, so I think that one comes out as well. Because the
I think the fanatics are more important to bring out than the tinker. The tinker can actually get a powder keg or can get the web if you care enough about that.
okay,
I think the fanatics have really low impact here.
all right, that's fair. Um, yeah, there aren't any Mishra's factories uh, to block the early creatures, so I think that something is really impactful. I guess from the goblins' perspective is there aren't that many blockers coming down from the blue-white deck, which against like a traditional land still deck, there are a lot more options to get in the way.
Now, would you? I mean, we already got 4 cards coming in from the Goblin deck, but would you think about Goblin King?
I would not. I don't think like the toughness does anything. Usually that's a card to combat Engineered Plague, or if you're playing against the Red Mirror, there aren't any mountains in the 4-color control deck, and it's kind of. I mean, there might be instances where it is just enough damage, but I feel like the Goblin Pyromancer kind of serves that role most of the time and does it probably a little bit better.
It is a Hearth Charm with legs, though. It does get the +1.
Yeah.
And then, would you leave the Gem Palms in, or would you take those? Would you think we'll take those out at all? There's only 2 targets.
Yeah, I mean, I might leave one in because there might be situations where you just want to get rid of a Wall of Blossoms. There's only 2 Wall of Blossoms from your opponent, and if it's dead per se, it still cycles. So the opportunity cost of leaving one in, I don't think is that high, but it definitely is a pretty low impact card because of the few creatures that the control deck has. So yeah, I mean, yeah.
I think the Cop Red might be kind of interesting because the Goblin player might board in Naturalizes because of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I don't think Naturalize is going to be good here. I hope he doesn't bring it in.
I mean, if you bring in like 1 or 2 copies, if you're bringing in 3 or 4, then I think you're diluting your deck a little bit too much. But I can see like there are certain times the Goblin deck still could beat a Circle of Protection red, but it really is going to have to flood the board. But so I can see maybe wanting to bring in a copy or 2 because it feels bad just to lose to certain cards. But in general, it seems like there's going to be a lot of positions where the control deck is not going to have the ability to control the board and pay mana to prevent a couple of damage every turn.
Agreed.
So do you think after board, do things change enough to give the control deck an edge, or do you think it's still favored for goblins?
I think it's still pretty favored for Goblins.
Okay.
Yeah. The mana is... Grand Coliseum is your biggest advantage of playing 4-color, and it's your biggest disadvantage.
Sure.
So... I mean, it's better than City of Brass for sure. I'm always kind of shocked at these decks that they don't play the original Calder Herds in the sideboard. I think if we had like Calder Herds to bring in, it'd be a little bit of a better fight.
The 4-color control deck?
Yeah. This is like the original like dump truck deck, if you remember that one. That had Caller of the Herd.
Oh, okay.
I think that puts you in an advantage where you can start picking off the creatures when they're coming in. Because the walls are just gumming up the board. But the actual Call the Herd can start fighting stuff.
Interesting. I haven't seen the Call of the Herd list in any of the 4-color control decks, so that would be an interesting take. And it kind of is like a transformational sideboard plan in a sense that obviously you're not expecting a lot of creatures out of the control deck, so you might get draws where you're just able to curve turn 3 Call the Herd into turn 4 Call the Herd, and that might be able to change a matchup if your opponent's not expecting it.
Works great with Factor Fiction too, of course.
Sure. So I think what kind of hand that Manos ideally has is good enough mana, like 1 or 2 interaction spells with Swords of Plowshares or Mana Leak or Counterspell, and then a Wrath of God. I think that's ideally what he wants to have.
Or Fire and Ice.
Yep, Fire and Ice. Or Wall of Blossoms, I guess, is another. It'll slow him down. It's a speed bump. It's not going to solve any problems, but it definitely will pad your life total for you to try and get enough mana and cards to take over the game.
Yeah, how you deal with Lackey is, I think, the most important thing here.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have some plan against Lackey.
Okay, so we see the same play that we saw in Game 1. The Grand Coliseum was answered by the Wasteland.
Is Manos' cam frozen?
No, he just played a Plains. If it's still frozen for you, then maybe you need to refresh. So yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, I could just do a play-by-play description and figure it out. So Shivan Reef has come down, so that's giving him access to blue and red mana. Skirk Prospector was the card that Felix added, so it's definitely not the Lackey, but and I mean I do like the card Skirk Prospector, but I'm not as willing to sacrifice it to put a Goblin Warchief into play against a deck like Manos because there are so many answers with Mana Leak and Swords of Plowshares and Wrath of God eventually, but so Felix is thinking he hasn't played a land right away, so I don't know if he's debating of which land he wants to play or if he just doesn't have any mana and he's thinking about sacrificing Skirk Prospector to play something.
I would assume he's got a land because he wastelanded right away. You would think he'd play the Goblin first if he didn't have a land.
Sure, I guess if you're keeping a 2-lander, then maybe you're not as willing to wasteland someone. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Maybe just deciding between like port or casting something.
Yeah, or it could be whether he wants to sacrifice the Skirk Prospector or not. And it's better to make your opponent, like if you're going to think at a point, it's better to do it before you play the land, because then your opponent might be thinking, oh, are they thinking about which land to play, or are they thinking about to sack the Skirk Prospector? So we do see the sequence of Goblin Warchief was cast because of the Skirk Prospector was sacked to add an additional mana, but Mana Leak was the response for Manos, so kind of get a little 2-for-1 there. So Reflecting Pool is the land added for Manos. Oh, so Manos had to take a damage to cast that. But from this position, you kind of have to like the control deck, though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Goblin deck has nothing on the board. I think he came off a mulligan too. He's down a card now from the Skirk Prospector.
We do so another Wasteland.
And the control deck has.
So
the control deck does have a bunch of 2-for-1s in it. So
yeah, I'm not sure which was targeted, whether it was the Shivan Reef or the Reflecting Pool, but it looks like Manos is gonna presumably ice in response, so that he can cycle it. So I think he's tapping going after the Shivan Reef. Yeah, it looks like it.
Makes sense. It cuts off 2 colors.
Yeah, it doesn't for now. I mean, like, but given the sequence, I don't think. All right, so there's the Yavimaya Coast, so blue is back online, but red is not available. The thing is, like, with the Wastelands is obviously it's better if you're able to put the pressure on the board and kind of close out the game with Wasteland as compared to if you don't have anything on the board, then you're just putting both players back and you're not pressuring your opponent. But yeah, I'm not saying it's wrong because Skirk Prospector isn't much of a clock. So
if you're able to potentially cut off blue from this deck too, that's taken a lot of stuff away from him to come back into the game.
All right, we see a Piledriver, but by himself he's not very scary. And that looks like it's absorbed. He takes a damage, but the gains 3 more.
So absorb is still in the deck, so that's important.
Oh, I did miss a point of damage because he's taken 1 from, I think, Mana Leak, Fire Ice, and Absorb, so he is at 20. Okay. All right, so a 4th land that's a Wooded Foothills, it looks like.
Yep. Piledriver.
Okay. But yeah, by itself, like that Piledriver is not very intimidating. If you have something like a Goblin Ringleader, you're just slamming it in that spot, right? Or do you think are you trying to pick a spot and like draw counter spells or?
Yeah, I'd much rather have him pick off the Piledriver than the Ringleader.
Okay. So Swords to Plowshares was the answer that Manos deployed for the Piledriver. Interesting. So he's just cycling this Fire Ice. I feel like that'd be a card I'd kind of want to save, but maybe if you don't have mana or if you have multiple Fire Ices, yeah.
He did miss a land drop too, and he's got no red.
Okay.
So.
All right. That's fair then. Yeah, that makes sense. So this is a Flooded Strand, so that's probably going to get an island. Yep.
Wall Blossom.
Probably. I guess it could have been like a Circle of Protection, but draws a card for Wall of Blossoms.
So now would be a great spot for the Ringleader because he can only have Mana Leak to counter it, or Hydroblast.
Accumulated Knowledge looks like is the card. I have to assume that Felix was just passing the turn. Yeah. So doesn't look like he's got 2 cards in hand and he's not casting either of them from this spot. So I guess cards he might be keeping are Caller of the Claw, Naturalize. I feel like most of the other cards you'd want to be playing, right?
Yeah, not sacking the Wooded Foothills is kind of odd here because he is flooding out.
Sure, I guess. Yeah, I don't know what that represents because, yeah, typically you would just say, sure, I'd rather have 1 less land in my deck.
Yeah, I'll just put a forest in the play or whatever it is.
So Impulse from Manos. So I have to imagine that things are looking pretty good for the 4-color control player. Seems like...
Yep, Reflecting Pool just got turned on for everything.
Sure. Seems like everything is kind of in Manos' control, and I don't know exactly how many cards in his hand, but the card advantage is just going to accrue with Fact or Fictions, and then pretty much like all his cards are either answers or card advantage cards. All right, so we see a Siege Gang Commander. I'm going to guess this is a Counterspell. Looks like it. So Counterspell answers the Siege Gang. And then he's going to take a damage to... Is that Accumulated Knowledge?
Yeah, for 2.
Yep. So yeah, here's where just like pretty much every turn Manos is going to try and play a land, and then either a card to answer something from Felix or to like further impulse, Fact or Fiction, or AK. So things look pretty good from his perspective.
Yeah, I mean, the 2 cards in hand, he could have like the Pyromancer in his hand too for the Goblin deck.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, that's no impact here, something weird like that.
Yeah, that's a card that you would keep in your hand until the right time.
Yep. Yeah.
That looks like a Fact or Fiction. I guess Manos is at 18. So it looks like it's Adarkar Wastes, Accumulated Knowledge, Island, Yavimaya Coast, Wrath of God.
And then Accumulated Knowledge is for 3 here.
Yeah, so that's pretty good. I mean, if it's 4-1 with Accumulated Knowledge,
He doesn't think Slam CG.
sorry, you just came back and you kind of cut out. What were you saying?
Oh.
Can you hear me, Lester?
Yeah. So what I was saying is maybe you just put the AK. You just try to get him to take AK, and you hope to slam Siege Gang, and he doesn't have Wrath of God. Maybe that's your only plan here.
Sure. I think. Okay, so I was gonna say I was suggesting the idea of 4-1ing against AK, and I mean I don't know what it's in Manos' hand, but it definitely is tempting to take the Accumulated Knowledge there. So.
Right. But he's already got other stuff too. Maybe the Wrath of God is just the. Because really, the red deck, Siege Gang Commander or Ringleader is really the only way you're gonna come back in this game.
Yeah. So that's a Circle Protection, I think. All right, so now Felix is taking the opportunity to crack his Wooded Foothills. He's getting a forest, so this might be a point where he's pointing a Naturalize, just given the timing of an enchantment's coming into play, and now he's... All right. We do see a Naturalize for the Circle of Protection. Okay. And Manos either doesn't have counter magic or he's not willing to fight over that.
Or he just doesn't care, yeah.
Yeah. There are 3 cards in Felix's hand, so...
That could be a reason why the Goblin deck is a little bit slow to the board.
Mm-hmm.
There's cards like Naturalize too.
Yeah. So, if you have a counterspell here, are you countering...
No.
No? You're just...
Are you?
I don't think so.
That's a 1/1. I'd wait to see what he gets.
Yeah, especially like with you having like 2 Wall of Blossoms in play. That like, I mean, they're like the Goblin on the board is good for like cards like Skirk Prospector or Goblin Piledriver or Siege Gang that might come down. I mean, I think you're going to counter Siege Gang all the time, so you have to assume that one's not going to resolve if you're holding the Hydroblast. But
even there, the Piledriver does nothing.
Right. Yeah, it would have 3 power. Yeah. Yeah, I think I would let him get a Ringleader or a Siege Gang Commander out of his deck. And especially because like he's probably not getting a 3-drop, so he's going to spend his entire next turn, and you're going to be able to counter it. I think I like saving the Hydroblast. I mean, if you have like a bunch of counter magic, then maybe. But still, I think it's pretty safe to let that Matron resolve.
I think you let resolve just for the knowledge too, to see what he's gonna go get.
Mm-hmm. So here's a Tinker. Yeah, I think that one's not really that worrisome from Manos' perspective. So Grand Coliseum is added on Manos' board. So at this point, the ways Manos wins is just to create justice. So he is basically going to look to put together Fact or Fiction's accumulated knowledges, and he doesn't even necessarily have to take the Decree of Justice right away because he does have the Gaia's Blessing. So when you...
I mean, theoretically, he could just fire him with the death, too. He could get into a situation where he's just blessing fires.
When you Fact or Fiction and put a Gaia's Blessing into the graveyard, does it trigger?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
When it is put into your graveyard from your library, and Fact or Fiction says... Yeah, I don't know, because it says reveal the top 5 cards of your library. They are separated into face-up piles. Put one pile in your hand and one in the graveyard. I mean, like, if you just look at the rules, technically it's coming from a pile and not from your library. I don't know if that's a rules thing, if, like, a pile is a existing thing in Magic, because I've never heard it, like, referred to, like, in any rule state, but I'm not 100% sure on that ruling.
Yeah, so if you go on wizards.com, it says it happens.
Okay. Did you look up Gaia's Blessing or you look up Fact or Fiction?
Fact or Fiction Blessing. It says any card that moves a blessing to your graveyard from the library will set it off.
Okay.
Classic example is a Fact or Fiction.
Perfect.
Blessing might be one of the coolest design cards, I think. Like,
it's one of those cards that, like, it feels like it almost does nothing, but, like, it does a lot in certain matchups. It's definitely... There are definitely times where it feels like too clunky, but I think that's good because there are definitely times that it's a really powerful tool. So I think cards that have a dynamic power level, whether it's either really important or not important at all in a deck, I think is pretty interesting.
it's definitely great in draft, too, for the record.
You
always draft it.
I mean, in the current formats, I think they're a little too fast, but yeah, in the older formats, I think the power level variation of cards and the likelihood that you're gonna get down to those last few cards is more likely.
Dominaria drafts?
I didn't do a lot of Dominaria draft. I don't know how was that card good in that format?
It was great. It was phenomenal, yeah.
Okay.
Alright, so do you scoop now? With your goblins?
Probably. So how many is this for?
7.
7. I mean, I don't
Unless
know.
he's getting big angels, which I don't think he is.
No.
I mean, your Tinker is gonna pick off a soldier every turn, so...
No, it don't. It's artifacts, and those aren't. Tinker
Yeah,
destroys.
it's a 1/2 though. They're gonna crash in.
Oh, okay. In that aspect, I thought you meant like from
You
its
got a
from
1/2
its.
against 1/1.
Yeah, I thought you meant from its activated ability.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I mean, you just play it out. This is. So there are 4/4s. I was like, why does he have 12 tokens? How did he get 12? So he made three angels. Okay. So no blocking from the Goblin Tinker. So I guess that only from this spot, I think you'd be afraid of like Siege King Commander, but you saw him get Goblin Ringleader. Okay, so they're the angels.
So, I guess Ringleader into Siege Gang into Gaea's Blessing or Gaea's Cradle.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see a world where that'd be pretty cool. Yeah, but even then, like, are you using the Siege Gang to take out some angels, and then you're kind of back at parity almost?
Yeah. Right.
So, yeah, it's likely that the 4-color control will just close out the game in 2 to 3 turns. Okay, so we are still on Felix's turn. Looks like he's casting the Ringleader that he found with the Matron.
I think you leave the forest untapped, right? Nope, you tapped it. The Carpulsum Forest.
The thought process is that you might need. Well, you're not going to get any green card off of a Ringleader.
Right, but it produces red. So like.
Sure. So do the mountains, though. So I mean, like, if you don't have a green card in your hand at that point, then you know you're not going to get a green card off of the common Ringleader.
Right.
All right. So after that, the Goblins player said he had enough. So I'm going to quick jump back over to the decks. So we did see a few of the sideboard cards that we talked about. So we did see Naturalize. We saw one Naturalize from the Goblins player. We didn't see Caller of the Call, though I'm pretty sure that card is coming in. I mean, I guess there are only 2 Wrath of Gods coming out of the... Like, are you bringing in all 3?
Other callers? I think so.
Okay.
Because it also, like, if he casts Decree and then does some crazy double blocks and stuff like that, it helps you there, too.
So
like, if you're crashing with your goblins and he uses Decree to kill stuff.
I mean, Tormod's Crypt is not a card I would expect to bring in against the 4-color control. Is that ever a plan of access that you're, like, trying to deny Gaia's Blessing shenanigans while also being okay against Accumulated Knowledge? Just doesn't do enough.
There's a chance that the control deck took out the blessings even.
Sure.
I mean, theoretically, he could have just taken those out.
Yeah.
I don't think Tormod's Crypt is ever a play in here, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I can see... Yeah, you're never going to be able to...
Yeah. I think if it was Phyrexian Furnace, you bring it in because you could just cycle it. You could pick something off and cycle it.
The thing is, yeah,
Tormod's Crypt is like no impact.
You have no answer to like Decree of Justice, so that card is inevitably going to come up. And like if you had all answers to all the threats of the control deck, then maybe it's reasonable. But yeah, okay. I was just trying to figure out a talking point. So.
So, being the control deck, would you play a mini game of you saw Naturalize, so take out all of your Naturalized targets?
Well, I wasn't very high on Circle Protection Red to begin with, so I think that is reasonable. The question is, are the cards that I'm bringing in any good? What is the card above
Powder Keg?
Seal Cleansing? Do you have the stream up, or are you just looking in the sideboard?
It's look at the deck list.
Below Null Rod and above Seal Cleansing. I don't know if you're looking at a text deck list, I'm not sure. But it's a white card. Is it Sacred Ground?
Yeah, Sacred Ground, protect your lands. So obviously Serenity's not good. Rainbow Efreet's not good. Seal Cleansing, Sacred Ground. Yeah.
I agree. Disenchant doesn't do anything. Guy's Blessing. Yeah, it's probably worse than Circle Protection Rod. So
You've got so many answers to the stuff he's doing. I mean, you saw he was even able to just cycle his fires there, fire and ices, and it didn't really matter.
yeah. All right. Well, definitely the Goblins deck is going to look for a turn one Lackey. that,
Right.
yeah, definitely. There are only 2 decrees in the deck, so I can see wanting to have access to one blessing. That there might be spots where, like early factor fiction comes up that it gets split where you like have to take the cards to stay alive, and I don't know. I can see that coming in, that where you want at least one decree or one Guy's Blessing in the deck.
Yeah, but I mean, you got impulse, so no matter what, you're gonna get that. You're gonna be able to set yourself a decree because you got impulse.
Oh, I was saying a situation if you're factor fictioning to stay alive, and the player like splits like 2 decrees against like the 3 cards you need to stay alive. But I guess that's pretty unlikely for a 2 of to be in the 5 card pile.
Right. That 2 decrees might just make it so you stay alive there too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always curious how you come up. I mean, obviously he's doing good, but I'm always curious how you come up with the 2 Wall Blossoms being the perfect number.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know exactly the deck process when they set up this gauntlet. I don't know if one person made all the decks and then I think they kind of like auctioned them off, and so of which ones you wanted to play, because I don't know if there's 8 or 16 players that are doing this, and it's just kind of to demonstrate like all the different decks in Premodern. So I don't know if you got the archetype first and then you found a list that you liked. I'm not exactly sure, but we do see the turn one Lackey, so Hydroblast or Swords of Plowshares is pretty important from this spot. And given that it's not used right now, I have to imagine he doesn't have it. Right? Like, there's no benefit of
Well,
what...
he doesn't.
I guess that he maybe...
There's no Pyroblast or anything.
Okay.
Right?
All right. All right, well, there's a backup one. Looks like the archetypes were drafted and then the deck lists were built, and there are 8 players.
Sure.
So each player has 8 decks to start with, it sounds like.
So then 2 Wall Blossoms might just be a metagame call then?
Yeah, and also I think I think a part of it is like I don't know how close this list is to what was posted on the Premodern Magic blog, because I remember when I first got into the format, this was one of the decks I was looking to play, and I don't remember the number of Wall of Blossoms, but I think, and I'm not sure, I think Martin didn't necessarily look to put per se optimal lists, but just like to give a general idea as a starting point for someone to go off of. So I'm not sure if there was a lot of thought going behind the card counts, or if it was just kind of, this is the archetype, I'm gonna get a list and go with it. So all right, looks like the Lackey was tapped with a Fire Ice, but then a Mogg Fanatic got in. So definitely I have to assume that there is no red mana in Manos' hand, because he might just be trying to stall the game a little bit until he can get to Wrath of God mana. So here's a Wall of Blossoms. Okay, that's pretty good because like if you're really just worried about the Goblin Lackey and you're trying to get to Wrath of God, you either can just soak up some damage with you might even just soak up some damage with the Piledriver and say, go ahead, put a bunch of goblins into play because I might Wrath you. Though Manos might be afraid of a port or a Rishna, or a wasteland though.
So here, this attack, you kind of get to see if he's got Wrath of God, right?
Yeah.
Because he blocks the Piledriver, it means he's got the Wrath. If he doesn't block the Piledriver, he's probably just trying to stop the Lackey from blowing up.
I mean, you could do either. I think from either perspective. So this Piledriver is a 5 power creature.
Right.
So.
Because if you don't have the Wrath of God and he slams, like say for instance, CG Commander here, you're in a really bad spot.
How is he taking just 5? Should be taking 6, right?
Yeah.
But okay, so it looks like he blocked the Lackey. Also, the question is, I mean, I guess, like, if Felix didn't put Mogg Fanatic into play, is Manos afraid to Wrath of God because of Collar the Claw? Like, do you give any hesitation as the 4-color control player if your opponent is just leaving 3 mana up all the time?
Good question. I don't think you really can in that situation because that Piledriver is
just dealing too much damage.
I suppose you take a turn to let the Piledriver eat the wall before you Wrath.
Yeah.
So you can increase your board.
All right, we see a source of Plowshares. This one
has to get the Piledriver.
Yeah, that would make the most sense to me.
Because now the board is stable.
Yeah. The Wall of Blossoms are a good answer for the Lackey. Though, if the Hearth Charm is still in the deck, that could come into play.
That is true.
All right, looks like 1 Mogg Fanatic is going to get through.
See, and now that the Wall of Blossoms, 2 of them is the perfect number.
Yeah.
This is where in these matchups, I don't think Fanatic is great. You're not picking off any mana creatures. It's just attacking for 1 is lackluster.
Yeah.
It might finish off a wall once in a while, though.
Actually, it seems pretty unlikely that it would because the goblins all have 2 power at most, or a Piledriver will get huge. So I guess a Piledriver attacking with 1 other Mogg Fanatic could do it, but
then that makes your Piledriver not very good afterwards. So
yeah.
It's a weird card. All right, so he's grouped up as 4. He's either got I mean, there's no way you would Wrath in this situation.
No. Is he playing a Circle of Protection? Is that a Sacred Ground? It looks like I think that's a Sacred Ground.
Oh, Sacred Ground, yep.
Interesting.
So the Wastelands were
on his mind.
To him.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll bring up that one.
That's got some weird rulings to it.
Yeah. I think with like Manlands we were confused. I think.
Yep.
So Felix has been on 3 mana for a while, so you have to imagine that. Though, I guess, going back to when we were talking about Mogg Fanatic, if he's just chipping in for 1 damage every turn, having the reach of just 2 damage out of nowhere might come into play.
Yeah. Yeah, so with the Sacred Ground, I mean, he's got no Manlands to worry about, but it wouldn't protect the Manlands.
Okay.
So he's literally just playing that to prevent the wastelands.
Is an effect like if I guess he doesn't have any manlands, but if you have a manland activated with Sacred Ground and someone uses a Gem Palm Incinerator, is that considered an effect, like the cycling ability? I think it might be.
Yeah.
So, but
Yep.
all right, we have more Mogg Fanatics. We're about to get crazy in here. I mean, in terms of like committing to the board, that actually seems like a pretty good card.
Yeah, you don't care if you're Wrath if you got Mogg Fanatic, right?
Yeah. Looks like you dropped for a second. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Just remuting the guys.
I wonder if you drop and come back in, if they have to remute you.
Good question.
Yeah, I definitely like think that Felix does have some higher converted mana cost cards in his hand because he has tapped out multiple, not tapped out, but he's gone below 3 mana, so I don't think he has Collar the Claw, or I guess he's thinking that this is not a board that Manos is willing to Wrath of God. And he's not playing other spells, so there's no War Chiefs or Sharpshooters or Matrons or whatnot being added. So this Mogg Fanatic was absorbed. Interesting. Do we know how many cards are in Manos' hand? Because it's... So this might be... Well, I guess still this is not necessarily a board state where you need a Wrath because you have the 2 Wall of Blossoms. But 2 damage every turn still might whittle Manos down enough.
I mean, I guess he's got no actual life game other than Absorb.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's what he was thinking.
All right, a 4th mana for Felix. Are the Haymakers going to come down? It's got to be a Ringleader. That looks like an accumulated knowledge, so presumably he doesn't have the answer right now.
That's his first one, too.
So how many cards are you upset if you draw with Goblin Ringleader? If you're hitting 2 goblins... If you hit 2, are you upset?
No.
No. Okay.
I think as long as you hit at least 1, you're not upset, right?
I might be a little upset if I hit 1. I think 2 is kind of expected, but I mean I think 1 is below average, but I guess maybe upset is not the right word.
You might just be extremely greedy too.
All right, so we see an end of turn accumulated knowledge, and this one's getting 2 cards. So I think Manos had to take some damage from his lands when he cast accumulated knowledge and Mana Leak in 1 turn.
So he's at 7 now? Yep.
Yeah. Felix is at 21 because of the Piledriver. I had him at 20. I don't know how relevant that is, but so whose position do you like more right now?
I mean, you if you had to pop into and take over a game, you'd want to take over the control deck, right?
I don't know. I mean, like, I guess there's how many cards are in Felix's hand? Because right now, as it sits, like Manos has to
Two,
do
maybe
something.
one.
Manos has to do something. Like he's gonna die
Right.
if you just attack for 2 every turn and then throw the Mogg Fanatics at him. Like you don't have to cast another spell. So I don't think it's. I mean, maybe the 4-color control is advantage because it has so many card draw spells, but I don't.
I guess he's
I
at
don't.
like a virtual 5.
Yeah, I don't mind Felix's
The Fanatics.
position. Because like, what if Felix's plan is just I'm not going to cast any more spells and I'm just going to attack every. Because there's not that many things that Manos can do to punish. Like there aren't any more Wall of Blossoms to reduce the clock. I guess you could plow a Goblin Lackey to reduce the clock. I guess Fire Ice. Okay, Fire Ice has a reason. That's probably the worst card.
Yeah, but he doesn't have red.
Oh, he doesn't.
He doesn't have red.
Okay.
A cop red here would obviously be very good.
All right, so he is pulling the trigger on the Wrath of God. He's going to take 2 damage from the Mogg Fanatics leaving.
Fantastics.
Yeah.
The Mogg Fantastics.
Cool, Jocks. Welcome to the format. It definitely has been a lot of fun. I've been playing it for between 2 to 3 years, and there's lots of innovations that we've already done over that course of the time, and there's a lot of deck diversity. All right, so the response to the Wrath of God is a ringleader. Did he flip over the cards?
I don't see him yet.
Did he, he's attacking? Did he not hit anything?
Nope. Hit 3 lands and a naturalize.
Oh, well, that's not ideal.
You're still not upset here, though, right?
Oh, he took a damage too for. Depending on your hand. I mean, I don't know if upset is yeah.
Yeah. That might be the one time you're okay with not hitting anything off ringleader.
Sure. Just your 4 mana 2/2 haste is good enough.
Yep.
All right, this is was that a fact or fiction? All right, I'm having trouble seeing the cards. I see an island, a reflecting pool, Gaia's blessing, a counterspell, I think a flooded strand. So what are you? So the thing to note about the counterspell, if you're separating it from the pile of island and reflecting pool, he would have to take a damage to cast it right now, which could be relevant with like like if you have a Mogg Fanatic or
the 4th Fanatic.
Yeah.
Even Sharpshooter becomes legal or becomes lethal then, though.
Yeah. So I don't.
So in this situation, I think the only card that matters is Blessing, because he can Blessing to try to get a Swords of Plowshare here, or a Hydroblast.
See, the problem with splitting it, I feel like I would switch the lands there. Like I feel like I would want Flooded Strand with the counterspell, because if you're going to give him a land, you want him the ones that makes him take a damage, right?
Right.
So he took Counterspell Island.
Counterspell.
Interesting. Because, I mean, as it sits, Counterspell doesn't do anything.
Right.
And he doesn't get a card with this Guy's Blessing trigger. It only gets a card when you resolve it.
So maybe he's already got the answer in his hand, and he was just the Fact or Fiction was just a freebie.
It's definitely possible. Otherwise, I feel like it's a mistake from Manos. Here's an Impulse.
So maybe he doesn't have it.
I guess, okay, so he's leaving up Adarkar Wastes so that he can hit either Swords of Plowshares or Hydroblast.
Hydroblast. And he already played a land this turn, right?
I don't think he did, but maybe he... Alright, so we got a lot of suspense here, whether he has... Does he have something? Nope, looks like he's taking 2 and he's dying. So the Goblins deck got there. All right, cool. I'm going
I
to
don't know.
switch over. We'll listen into the players and get a little bit of conversation about their take on the matchup.
No, because I was expecting either a Swords or a Hydroblast. That's why.
Oh yeah, I think. Oh right, good
So
call.
I had actually 6 outs right now with the impulse.
Yeah, good call with the
Yeah,
hydroblast.
so I could find either the Hydroblast or the.
Yeah,
But again, I would be at one. I
yeah.
don't know what else you had in hand.
I had one naturalized and I drew another one.
Okay.
So actually, those naturalized were quite bad. Also, in game two, I bought it in two colors
Mm,
and for naturalized, and it was quite bad because I think your list plays only two Wrath of God, and I
yeah.
didn't have the opportunity to actually play the caller.
Hmm. Well,
Um,
to be honest, I even moved my circle of protections in the third game. I moved them away
okay,
so
yeah.
that you have even more, cards. Well, I kept the Sacred Ground though because
Yeah,
the first 2 games the Wastelands were uh, coming,
yeah, yeah,
every turn, so I
yeah,
would want, to keep my lands at least at some point intact. And
yeah,
I know that you wouldn't have destroyed this because you would have keep them for the circle.
yeah.
So yeah, but it was I think the turn that I cast the Sacred Ground, it was a mistake because I had the
Mhm.
2 counterspells. Oh, let me see what Mike's is saying. I think we need to unmute them. Okay,
Okay,
let's
yeah, we
unmute.
we will unmute him. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been just listening to you guys, so you can keep talking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, that was actually the mistake on that turn because I had I could counter 2 spells for you on that turn. I had a counter spell and the absorb, so I
Mm-hmm.
could have countered the fanatic and the what card did you play next on that turn? Play
Um,
fanatic and one more
and
card.
after that, I played another Lackey.
Another lackey, yeah, which was another threat. I mean, even one threat was um, you know, was threatening me
Mhm.
actually with a life total, and I didn't want it in play.
Yeah,
But I was afraid of you getting a wasteland at that point, and I was already tight on mana, and I
mhm.
didn't want to lose any land.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
think that was the turning point there on the game.
It was, yeah. I mean, it was interesting that you countered. Were you actually afraid of me destroying your wall? So I could have sacked all three fanatics. So wall would have one damage marked.
Mm.
Or were you afraid of just me having one more creature I could also sack for
I
that?
had the Wrath of God in hand, and that would give you 3 more damage,
Yeah,
by
correct. Yeah,
sacrificing the
yeah,
fanatics. So
yeah,
it was
yeah.
another thing that I didn't want to happen.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, so I was quite unsatisfied with how I bought it in game two
Mm,
because I think I bought it out three fanatics and
mm.
I bought it in two callers. Yeah, two callers and something else. Uh, yeah. So
Did you actually keep the Tinker in game three?
yeah, I
You
mean,
did?
yeah, he was. Yeah, probably I should have bought it out this one too.
Mm.
I don't know. I could
Because
have bought in a Goblin King instead.
I brought no what's it called, powder keg.
Okay, you didn't bring? Oh,
Mm-mm,
okay,
mm-mm.
interesting. Yeah,
Well, the powder keg with goblins is a bit lackluster because most of the time the casting cost is it's not the same. So you have a Lackey, and then you have a Piledriver, and then a Warship, and then let's say a Siege Gang. So this thing does almost nothing. So I didn't wanna risk it having it destroy only one Lackey or one Fanatic.
yeah,
So that's why I'd rather keep it in the sideboard.
yeah. So, yeah. So for me, it was just like So as I said, I think I brought in too many stuff. So in game 2, I kept both charms. Then I had
Uh-huh.
4 naturalize, and also I brought in 2 callers, which is a bit too
Mm.
much
Mhm.
for the ringleader. So I knew that, and I boarded out 1 ringleader and 1 match win too.
Okay.
But then I thought it's better to have more goblins on the in the play
Mm.
instead of just drawing on naturalize and so.
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, I still brought in the naturalizes because I would otherwise just straight lose to cock red.
Mm.
But I think the callers weren't really that necessary. And I mean, the charm I kept one because you might play the Wall of Blossoms and I can make my lackeys unblockable, for example.
Yeah. 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 I figured. I was just expecting, that at least in the end, with the last Fact or Fiction or the Impulse, because I actually saw more than 9 cards.
Mm-hmm.
I was expecting to see at least one Blast or one Sword to Plowshares, which
Mm-hmm.
didn't happen,
Yeah.
to destroy the last thread of yours. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Quite close games, I think. So when I looked at the list before the game, I thought, okay, the matchup looks much better for me than against Landstill, actually, I think,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't
Yeah.
have humility, and that is a huge difference.
Uh, Not only that, I mean the power of the land still are the manlands
Yes,
and not the spells that deck casts.
yeah,
Actually, manlands is
yeah,
the most the most powerful thing the deck has, along with the permission
yeah,
and and this
yeah,
deck has
especially
no
the
manlands. Yeah.
yeah, the factory makes a huge difference. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
exactly because you can pump it to a 3/3 and
Yeah.
lock and kill all my stuff, and this in addition with humility is just devastating.
So you guys pretty much answered all the questions about sideboarding that I had. The one thing I want to talk about is the inclusion of Hearth Charm in the Goblin deck. Is that something that you tested, or is this more of a you wanted to try it out?
Uh, Actually, someone on Discord had pointed out this card. I think it was Patrick MP, and then I didn't use the card before, and I thought it looked pretty nice. And the point is, you can actually destroy Mishra's Factory. You can destroy Dreadnought, Masticore. You can also make your pile drivers and lackeys unblockable,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of key for this deck. And even if you don't need any of these 2 modes, you can still give all your goblins +1/+0, which is not a dead card. So I thought it's kind of very nice card for goblins.
Yeah, it's an interesting card. Yeah, it's just one I hadn't seen before, so I wasn't sure if it was a new innovation or something that you've been kind of sitting on for a while.
It is. I think it's a new innovation. At least I didn't know it before. So it's my first version with this card, but it's not my personal idea, but from another guy. I think Ireland King
Okay.
on Discord. Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else you guys wanted to add?
No, I'm fine.
Lester, did you have any questions or comments?
Kind of surprised that you sided out Rishon import from the Goblin deck. I thought
Yeah.
squeezing the mana was pretty important. Would you do that again, or were you happy siding that out?
Um. Okay. I wasn't actually happy to take it out, but the point is, did, I never want to board out a red source. So I had to board out either Cradle, Wasteland, or Port. Maybe I should have boarded out the Cradle because
I mean, you could take out like a Hearth Charm at that point, like take out an actual card and just have an extra mana source and same amount of
yeah,
colors. So
yeah. I totally thought about playing 25 lands too. So actually, before game 3, I was like, okay, will I take in the Port or play another Goblin? And I opted for playing another Goblin. Yeah, because I mean, yeah, it's nice to have mana denial, but I thought I would need as many goblins as possible.
And at Manos, did you actually think about bringing in the web because of the ports and wastelands at all?
No, because he only runs, well, since I know the list, he only runs 2 ports, so I wouldn't like to have, just one sideboard and one card just to counter 2 cards that might not even appear in the whole game at all. I was, but I did bring as I said, the Sacred Ground, because Wastelands cut me actually in specific colors, and I didn't want to happen in this game. For example, red is very, very important in this deck because of the fire, especially versus this matchup. And or the green one for the walls in order to have the early blocker. So I didn't want this to happen. But as I said, that was a misplay there, playing the Sacred Ground. So if I could have waited at least one turn, I think it would have been much better. But I was too afraid of the Wasteland at that point because I was already too tight on mana. That's why.
Cool.
Fair enough. Well, good match, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So I'm going to have them leave. We do have another match coming up in about 10 minutes. That matchup will be the Angry Ghoul deck against Pink Prison. We have 2 new players coming in. So I am going to end the stream momentarily and get things set up for those players and take a quick break. But yeah, we'll be live again in about 10 minutes. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Lester. You'll be back as well for the next match. But we'll just end this real quick. So if you guys want to take a quick break, but we'll be back shortly.